All right, heroes, welcome to another live studio recording of the Jew Curious Show podcast. So delighted everybody's here. If you're here, chime in, let me know where you're from. Let's see, I'm coming from sunny, it's getting sunnier, Southern California. We've had kind of the rainy season for a while. What's been really weird is I found out it's parrot season. Apparently, there's this annual spring migration of green parrots from somewhere going to someplace. And so we've had this flock of squeaking birds go by and like parrots, like you might get in a pet store or something, landing on my balcony. Neither here nor there. Just wanted to know rainy season is over. Parrot season has begun. So I don't know if you have parrots where you are, but come and get some because we've got plenty of parrots here right now. So it's probably not what you tuned in to watch. So this is an experiment that we're doing right now with the Jew Curious Show podcast, and we are doing live studio recordings on video of things that are just going to be audio. The neat thing about this is that I can get people who are fans, listeners, frenemies of the Jew Curious Show to come in and ask questions live while I'm teaching some Torah. So I'm going to teach some stuff today. I'm going to give shout outs to Teresa is here from Cyprus. So glad to see you, Teresa. As people come in, I'll give you a little high five there. So really delighted to have people learn with me in this way. And then the audio of this is going to go to the Jew Curious Show podcast. And so it's a little bit like a live radio recording. If you've ever been to a live recording of a radio show, you get to hear things and maybe see some things that you don't when you hear it on the radio later because they edit stuff out. I may repeat myself from time to time, sort of do that anyway, but you may take some, multiple takes of a certain thing or back up and say something over again. That's the fun of live. Fun for me anyway. I don't know if it's fun for you, but I hope people like seeing behind the scenes as to how a podcast can be put together. So we've got Milo. Hey, Milo's here from Denmark. So glad to see Milo here. So we've got Cyprus and Denmark. Any Americans out there not knocking it? We had Cyprus, Denmark, and usually get a few people from Florida waiting for my New Yorkers to come in. It's about lunchtime in New York right now. So let's go ahead and get into it. So what we're going to be talking about today is rabbis. And that might sound kind of self-centered. I'm a rabbi myself, pretty proud of that. But what it means is I'm a teacher of Torah. That's what rabbi means, at least according to my teacher, Rabbi Joel Rembaum. Rabbis can do lots of things. We can comfort people in times of trouble. Like we can act like, the word in English is pastor, I guess. We can pastor to people. Rabbi Lawrence Hoffman also teaches that rabbis serve a priestly function, like we officiate things. We say the magic words, or we say the holy words. We order rituals so that they're conducted correctly and in an uplifting fashion. So rabbis serve a pastor function and a priestly function, and also, according to Rabbi Hoffman, a prophetic function. Some people might say, "Yeah, you're prophetic." No, what I mean is the prophets of the Bible were sort of social commentators, if you will. Sometimes they were social critics. Sometimes they were social advocates, meaning Yeshayahu or Isaiah would look out and say, "You guys, you're not doing it right. Bad things are going to happen." And then they did. So it made him seem like kind of a fortune teller, but he's not a fortune teller. He's just an observant Jew, if you will. And then sometimes prophets are there to give people hope. Jeremiah also, beat up on folks a lot and said, bad stuff's going to happen. It's going to be terrible. But then when it was terrible, he was also there to say, "Hey guys, things are going to be okay. Just trust in God, trust in each other, do the right thing, and we're going to get out of this mess." So rabbis serve a lot of different functions, but my teacher, Rabbi Joel Rembaum, said the number one priority of any rabbi is to teach Torah. That's what we do. And so today we're going to talk about a little bit more about what a rabbi is, maybe what a rabbi isn't, why you need one in your life. I think everybody should have a rabbi. Even rabbis need rabbis sometimes. How to find one if you are indeed convinced that you need one, both in, let's say, offline, IRL, in meat space, if you will, like how to find a rabbi in your community, how to find one online if you can't connect one in your community. I highly recommend connecting one-on-one in person with a rabbi if possible, but I know that's not possible for everyone who might want a rabbi in their life. So we'll talk about how to find a rabbi offline, how to find a rabbi online, and then maybe we're going to do some troubleshooting. The reason I'm teaching this topic today is because so many of my students that I talk to, people I connect with through my YouTube channel or the podcast, and I ask them, what are the frustrations that you have in your Jewish life or your pursuit of a Jewish life or your conversion process? And one of the number one things people mention is that they can't seem to connect with a rabbi. Either they can't find one where they are, they don't know where to look. Rabbis don't always answer phone calls or emails. Who has two thumbs and is guilty of that sometimes? This guy. So we'll talk a little bit about why that is. Sometimes you meet a rabbi and they don't want to talk to you, or they don't really think they can be your rabbi. They're serving a particular community. Maybe you don't fit in that community and they're not the right rabbi for you. Then they're just getting out of the way so that you can find the right rabbi for you. And even if you find a rabbi, and even if you can connect with a rabbi, a lot of people have a lot of, I'll say, anxiety or fear or concern, like, what if the rabbi pushes me away, right? I'm talking to this person who's a scholar of Torah. I feel nervous about that sometimes. And I hear this. And so I wanted to talk today about why you need a rabbi in your life, what a rabbi is in the first place, how you can find one, and how you can get over some of those barriers that you might be experiencing. So that's my purpose today. We've got Carla in the house from Arcadia. We've got Grysicle. Shalom already. All right. Very impatient to learn today. We've got Steph. Hello, Steph. I forgot Grysicle's here from Indian Wells, Palm Desert. I think I was in the gym this morning, and I think there's a tennis tournament going on in Indian Wells. I didn't even know what Indian Wells was until I saw people playing tennis there. So forgive my geographic ignorance. So I know a little bit about Torah, not a lot about geography. All right. Well, let's get started. The first thing I want to do is start with a bracha, because we're going to be doing some Torah learning today, maybe a little bit. Maybe I'll save the bracha. I'll save the bracha till after we do the podcast intro. So like I said, this is a live studio recording of a future podcast episode. So I'm going to do some of those things that, is totally irrelevant to YouTube, but I need to record them for the podcast, like the normal intro that I do. And I might leave some space in here where I plug in intro music later and things like that. So if it sounds weird, if it sounds like I'm not talking to you directly, no offense, just hang out, come along for the ride, and let's do this. All right, here we go. Very nervous. Hero, do you have a rabbi? Today, here in episode 30 of the Jew Curious Show, we're going to talk about what a rabbi is, why you need one, how you can find one, and what to do if you're having trouble or fear connecting with a rabbi. Right after this bass. Boom, boom. Sorry, I'm not going to beatbox. It's really outside of my comfort zone. But I wanted to put that in there because that's where we put the intro music. So play along. All right, take a little pause here. And then what I normally do is thank my announcer, thank the house band. I won't call it house band. Joey Weissenberg and the Hadar Ensemble have very graciously given me permission to use their favorite song of mine as the intro track and outro track for this show. So that's where I plug this in. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Joey. And most of all, thank you, Hero, for once again listening to the Jew Curious Show. That's awfully presumptuous of me. This may be your first time hearing this podcast. It may, if you're in the live studio audience, it may be your first time watching one of my YouTube videos. If that's the case, if you're watching me for the first time, you should know I've got about 170, 180 videos out there for you to consume with your eyes and maybe even your ears. And I don't know if you can smell it. Maybe that's probably something in your house, not necessarily on the computer. But if this is your first time here, I highly encourage you to subscribe to this YouTube channel. I've been doing a lot of live videos lately, and subscribing lets you know when new topics are coming out and what other videos I have to provide, things on the holidays. Probably be doing something about Purim pretty soon, so might want to check that out. But subscribing to this channel gets you in the know for all those things, and then you are automatically notified when I make a new video. If this is your first time listening to the Jew Curious Show podcast, I have a suggestion for you, and that is to subscribe to this podcast, your favorite podcast listening device has some sort of way that you can indicate your desire to subscribe to this show, click a button, tap a picture of a button, more likely, on your smartphone or something like that, and then you will automatically download these episodes as they come out in the future, and you'll have access to the whole archive of the 29, or actually 30. We did like an episode 0. This is 30-ish episodes of this podcast so far. Here are the great interviews we've done. Here's some of the great live Q&As that we've done. I even have an episode on there where it's like a 2-hour kind of shaky recording of me and a Muslim leader and a Christian leader in dialogue with each other last summer here in beautiful downtown Burbank, California, and right here in Southern California. And so if you subscribe to this show, you'll get access to all that. You'll get notified when new shows come up, and I'll be glad you did. And I think you'll be glad you did too. So enough about that. Let's jump right into today's topic. The reason I'm putting this show together, and it's got the word rabbi out there, and that might sound kind of self-centered because I am one, but I'm pretty proud of that fact. I did a lot of reading to get here. And I have a lot of students based on the YouTube videos that I do and the podcasts that I do. That's this thing right here. I ask some of my listeners and viewers, what is one of your greatest frustrations when it comes to doing Jewish learning, when it comes to accessing Jewish wisdom and becoming part of a Jewish community? What is your roadblock? What is your pothole? What is standing in your way? And one of the most popular answers that I get to this question is, I can't connect to a rabbi, or I haven't connected to a rabbi. And this comes from a lot of different sources. So we'll get into some of those frustrations here in a minute. But first, I want to talk about exactly what a rabbi is, maybe a couple of words on what a rabbi isn't, to bust any myths out there. I'll talk a little bit about why I think you need one. I think everybody could use a rabbi. I know, I have several. I have like an embarrassment of riches of teachers in my life. That's just, I'm a lucky guy. But why I think it's good for you to have a rabbi in your life, how to find one, both in the real world and online if you can't access one in the real world, and online's kind of the real world, I think. But if you can't find one that you meet in person, or maybe that's uncomfortable for you, you'd like to start online, how you can find a rabbi online, all this being the rabbi that's right for you. This can be a very personal decision because it's a very personal relationship. It's key that you find someone whom you can work with and feel comfortable with long term. And then we'll do some of the troubleshooting because and then we'll do a little bit of troubleshooting because sometimes people can't find a rabbi, like don't know where to look in the phone book, if that's such a thing anymore, or rabbis don't necessarily answer their phone calls or emails. That's a real thing. That's a thing that I've been guilty of before when people have reached out to me, and I want to explain why that is the case often. Some people have met rabbis who have discouraged them or pushed them away or said, you know what, you should maybe find a rabbi, but I'm not the rabbi for you. And I know that can be frustrating, but I want to explain why that is and why you shouldn't be discouraged. And I also want to address people's fear and people's anxiety. People often say to me that, I want to reach out to a rabbi, but I'm really nervous. What do I say? Are they going to judge me? Are they going to have expectations of me that I can't meet? And is that going to stop my Jewish journey cold? And if your Jewish journey is important to you, the idea that meeting with this stranger could shut that down, of course that's going to cause some anxiety. So I want to ease some of those pains today and certainly take some questions that people have here in the live Q&A chat. So that's one of the benefits of doing this on YouTube Live. I can see what questions people have, answer them live, and then people on the podcast can learn from that as well. So everybody who's in the chat right now, I got, looks like we made Minyan. I got about 10 people watching right now. Yeshikoach. And we've got people from Cyprus and Denmark and Palm Desert, California. And who else? We have got people from all over, and I'm just delighted. We got somebody from Arcadia, California. So SoCal is in the house today. All right. And we got Marin County. That's north, let's see. Marin County, San Rafael, and Temecula. Oh my goodness gracious! The Isle of Copper and interesting banks. Okay, no, that's Cyprus. We got Vanessa is here from Germany. So glad to see you, Vanessa. All right, let's do this. So first off, what is a rabbi? The word rabbi, I'll just put my etymological nerd hat on right now. And that's not entomological, that's bugs. This is rabbis. Etymologically, the word rabbi comes from the word rav, which can mean like big or greater or taller or something like that. But rav, in this case, means one's superior or master, not in the sense of like a slave master, God forbid, but more like a schoolmaster, right? Or like Mr. Miyagi was a karate master, like someone who is a little bit ahead of you in the game, who can then guide you. So that's what that word Rav means, and then the I on the end of it is what the grammarians call an enclitic ending. That's a possessive. So it goes from Rav to Ravi, and if you just kind of spell it out and translate it in Hebrew, it goes to rabbi. And so what it means is essentially my teacher, right? And so that's what a rabbi is a teacher. But what that ending implies is it has a possessive noun to it. And more than the possessive, it implies a relationship. So there's a teacher, and then there's my teacher. I remember when I was first considering going to seminary, more than considering, I'd been like accepted. I was about to move out of the country. I was about to move out of the state of Minnesota to come to California for my training. And I was having lunch with a Jewish friend of mine, kind of a going away lunch. We were coworkers. And she says, "Oh, John, I'm so excited that someday you might be my rabbi." And I almost called the seminary and pulled my application, because it was one thing to consider being a rabbi, but then when a good friend of mine, whom I'd known for a long time, who I really trusted, who taught me a lot about being Jewish, said, "My rabbi," I freaked right out. Right? I thought that is a lot of responsibility to go from being a teacher to someone's teacher. But I got over it. I'd already leased an apartment in California. I'd already bought the plane tickets and all that stuff. So I thought, okay, we're going to give this a shot. But what's important here is that it is a teacher with a personal relationship. And that's critical. There's a teaching in Pirkei Avot, and this is why I think it's important for people to have some. Then this is why I think it's important for people to have a rabbi, because it says right there in the Mishnah Pirkei Avot, "Oseh lacharav." And you could read that a couple of different ways. Oseh usually means make, so you could read that like make yourself a teacher, and that could mean you should study a lot so that you become a master of the material. But it's often translated as get yourself a rabbi. Like you should make yourself this relationship with a teacher. And the reason that this is critical, I'll go back to something I often share from my teacher, Rabbi Elliot Dorff, who says that Judaism is not an esoteric tradition. It's not a tradition of secrets known only by initiates and insiders and stuff. It is an exoteric tradition, meaning that the wisdom in Judaism, what's in Torah, what's in the commentaries, what's in the Talmud, is open to everyone. It is accessible. It is literally an open book. The trick is, it's a big book, and it's often in Hebrew and in Aramaic and in Judeo-Farsi and all the languages that all the rabbis have written in, and all the commentators have written in throughout millennia. And so it's a big book, which means you might not know where to start. And when you get there, you might not know what it says. And so the rabbi is there to help you overcome that challenge. I will say all the more so, beyond just the texts that we have on the library shelf here, in an age of information, in an age of an internet, in the age of Wikipedia, where something like 4 billion people of the 7 billion people on Earth are connected to the internet. That means 4 billion people can both access Jewish wisdom, but can also contribute to it and write about it. And there is just such a vast amount of stuff to learn out there. It can be really hard to decide where to start, what sources are trustworthy, and not just trustworthy, but appropriate for you, right? You come to this library with no idea what to pick off the shelf first, and it can be overwhelming. And if you pick a book that's inappropriate for you, you might develop a very narrow view of what Judaism is when maybe something that's more appropriate for you gets left untouched. And so that's the role a rabbi can have in somebody's life, and why I think a personal relationship with a rabbi is key, because that teacher can get to know you, get to know where you're coming from, get to know what your goals are, and guide you to the next right step, or maybe the first step that's right for you, or the next most appropriate helpful step for you. And so a rabbi is a teacher, but a rabbi should also be somebody who gets to know you, to know what the right thing to guide you to is. And there's a lot of self-study involved. There's a lot of partner study involved. You don't need to be just sitting with the rabbi and only listening to the rabbi all the time. You can study a lot on your own, but the rabbi is there to help you study the right thing, and also to be a resource when you have questions about that thing that you were studying. So that's why I think it's so important that if you are interested in Jewish study, if you're interested in acquiring wisdom from this vast open book, it's very valuable to have a guide on your path. So I'm going to stop selling rabbis now. Make me a little uncomfortable. But it's important to me. I wouldn't know what I know if it weren't for all the people who held the door open for me and guided me on the right path. And so now I want to pay it forward and teach you how to find a rabbi that's right for you. Which brings me to how to find one. Before I get into that, I want to take a look at the chat real quick. We got more people talking about Palm Desert. I guess it's the tennis thing that's going on. Let's see. Grycicle shares Marin County, San Rafael, and Temecula all have female rabbis now. That's awesome. David Erickson saying hello. We got Germany. Woolen Bullet. This is a new face for me. I don't know if I've seen you here before. Hello from Nova Scotia. We are international, y'all. We are in Nova Scotia. There's a musical I saw there's a musical that I listened to on Nova Scotia recently. I think it's Come From Away. Big fan of that one. Played it in the minivan quite a bit on a recent car trip. Let's see. All right. So let's keep going. Sorry, just a little pause there. That's bad radio, but I want to stay on top of the chat to make sure I'm answering people's questions. So how do you find a rabbi? So nowadays, it is probably easier than ever because of the internet to find a rabbi offline, let's say. Wherever you are in the world, if you are connected to the internet, and I'm going to make that assumption because you are listening to a podcast right now, or you are watching a YouTube video right now, that you have access to the internet. And so what you can do is search for a rabbi, or where I would probably start is search for the closest synagogue to you, or synagogues. If you are privileged to live in an area of the country or the world that has multiple synagogues, you get to know the different places that are in your town. Now, caveat, not all rabbis are in synagogues. That's a common point of contact. Many rabbis do work in synagogues, but I'll say it's the easiest place to find a rabbi. And P.S., not every synagogue has a rabbi who works there or studies there or teaches there. But this is probably the easiest thing to do, and we'll talk about what to do if that doesn't work for you. But the first thing to do is look for a synagogue near you, because chances are there is a rabbi who teaches in that synagogue or who works in that synagogue, or there's a rabbi that visits that synagogue from time to time. So if they don't have a rabbi, they would at least know a rabbi, most likely. And so somebody there can either connect you with the rabbi who works there, or can connect you with the rabbi that they know, right? Because I'm going to guess that there's not a lot of synagogues out there where there's not at least one person who knows a rabbi. So that's a good place to start. If you can't find a synagogue near you that has connections, you might want to look for Jewish classes near you. Things like Eventbrite, things like Meetup often list Jewish classes in the area. Sometimes Yelp has Jewish classes in the area. So look for a Jewish class near you. Maybe there's a rabbi who teaches that class, or there might be Jewish people there who are very knowledgeable, who can be like kind of a rabbi for you, or at least they will know who to put you in touch with. So that's a good way to find a rabbi near you in physical space. And I think that I'm going to lead with that because I think if you can access a rabbi in person, that is the best. That's probably the most effective way because that person can really sit with you and face to face talk, get to know you. That's the optimal way to do it. But I understand that not everybody has that access, especially the people I connect with through the podcast, through videos, through the Jew Curious School. It's because people live in places where they don't have access to a rabbi, or maybe the rabbis that they have access to, they're just not making the right connection with them. And so another place to look for rabbis is online. And now, if you found me, you found a rabbi. I'll put it that way. But there are lots of other rabbis who do great work online. If you want to find some, I would say listen to the podcast or look through the show notes of various episodes of the podcast. I'll say at least half, or if not the majority of my guests have been rabbis. And in the show notes, there are ways to connect with them. Another podcast, I think by the time this gets out, this will already be in the wilderness. We have just released a podcast interview with Rabbi Danya Ruttenberg, who is teaching some profound Torah on Twitter. Right. And so she works in Chicago, she writes books, but she also connects with people on Twitter. Another great rabbi who works in a synagogue but is active on Twitter, I don't know if he's going to be mad at me for recommending him, is who I consider one of my closest, most important teachers is Rabbi Aaron Alexander. He's on Twitter as well and teaches some profound Torah on Twitter. So you can find rabbis on Facebook. You can find rabbis on Twitter. You can find lots of rabbis on YouTube. YouTube is one of my favorite platforms for learning stuff. So just go to YouTube and in the search bar, drop in the word rabbi, and you will see a lot of faces, many with beards on them, but not all, because I don't grow a beard because my beard grows out white, and my wife doesn't want to be married to her grandpa. But you will see a lot of rabbis on YouTube, just like you will on Facebook and Twitter and places like that. And learn what you can from them, from their social media posts, from their videos. I imagine most of them have some way to get in touch with them, right? And I imagine most of them would be delighted to hear from you. So that brings me to this idea, because I was thinking, you might email somebody. A lot of times people have trouble connecting with the rabbi. They can find a rabbi, they can find a synagogue, they can find a class, they can find a rabbi, and they reach out to that rabbi and by a phone call, leave a message, send an email, and crickets. Maybe I'll throw in some sound effects there on the podcast. People have posted this to me, like, I reached out to a rabbi, but he didn't answer my phone calls. I reached out to a rabbi, but he hasn't answered my email, or she hasn't answered my email or phone calls. And that's real. And let me defend my brothers and sisters for a second and tell you why. Many rabbis, well, I'll say most rabbis I know are incredibly busy. And I hate using that excuse, but it is a reality that rabbis in communities, especially rabbis in synagogues or working for schools, their primary responsibility is to the members of that synagogue or the students in that school, and they may be doing all they can just to stay connected with the people for whom they are already responsible, and it's difficult for them to prioritize somebody who's coming in that they've never heard from before. Right? Most rabbis I know get hundreds of emails a day, and so it's easy to get lost in there. I myself get lots of emails. I get lots of Facebook messages. I don't always get to answer all of them. My primary focus is on the students of the Jew Curious School. That's why I like these live chats, because I get to meet a lot of different people who can chime in. But my primary responsibility is to the people in a synagogue where I'm teaching right now, and also in the Jew Curious School. And so it's possible that you may reach out to me and you may not hear back from me right away, or it may take a couple of times. And so I'm in that boat. Just about every rabbi I know is in that boat. And I only say this not to make excuses, but to make sure that you don't take it personally, right? If you don't hear back from a rabbi, it's probably just because they don't have the bandwidth to get back to you, but it's not your fault. It is not you. There's nothing wrong with you that the rabbi is not getting back to you. I will say that sometimes you do connect with the rabbi, and the rabbi might say, then I can't. The rabbi might say, I've got too much on my plate. Or they may talk to you and they may decide, I'm not the rabbi for you, right? Maybe they don't have, it's like sometimes you call up a doctor and they're like, I'm not taking on any new patients. Or it could be a circumstance that that rabbi is a specialist in a certain area and you're sort of outside of that specialty. In many communities, and I associate a lot with Jewish convert Facebook groups because I qualify and I get to know what struggles that people have. And so many people encounter rabbis who are not interested in sponsoring somebody for conversion or training somebody for conversion because that's their particular community and theology that they decide not to work with converts for some reason or another. And so you may not be able to connect with a rabbi right away. You may connect with a rabbi and that rabbi, for whatever reason, decides that she or he can't spend the time with you. And again, I only say this not to make excuses, but to make sure that you know that it's not because of any flaw in you, hero. That's that rabbi's deal. It's not about you. So all that is to say, persist. If you are drawn to study Jewish stuff, if you are drawn to glean wisdom from the Jewish tradition, then keep at it. There's a reason that you are drawn to this kind of study. I'm not a mystical guy, but I feel like if people are drawn to something, they should pursue it. And if you don't connect with the first rabbi you reach out to, or the second, or the 42nd, it's not you. Just keep persisting. Just keep asking those questions. Just keep looking because there's a reason you're drawn to it, and you shouldn't stop just because you don't get your first or your second or your third email responded to. And so I would continue to keep looking in your area first. If you don't have a rabbi in your area, reach out to rabbis online. And if you don't hear back right away, try again. Because I think it is absolutely critical for somebody to have a teacher in their life. And I'm not saying that because I'm a teacher. I'm saying that because I wouldn't be the teacher that I am, or the Jew I am, or the human being that I am if I didn't have incredible teachers in my life. And I learned the hard way about how to be persistent until I had the relationships with rabbis in my life that have taught me things that have changed my life for the better in profound ways. So that's the bulk of what I wanted to get across today. I wanted to help you understand what a rabbi is, why it's important to have one in your life as a guide, as a person to help you find the right next step for you, how to meet with a bunch of different rabbis. And listen, if you find a rabbi and that person's happy to study with you, but on your end, the connection just doesn't seem right. Maybe what they're teaching doesn't really fit your life, or whatever reason, you just, don't connect. It's okay to talk to different rabbis. Don't feel like you're being disloyal, right? It's not, if a rabbi worth her salt or his salt will not be jealous if you have a number of teachers, because every rabbi I know has had a number of teachers. So don't be discouraged by that. Don't be put off or scared to talk to a different rabbi if you meet one and it's not working out, let's say. That's fine. So find as many as you can. Talk to people until you decide, okay, this is a good relationship here. I'm going to learn a lot from this person. And you may have multiple rabbis at a time or over the course of your life, and that's okay. And if at first you don't connect, try again and try a different rabbi until you find somebody who can guide you on the path that you're seeking to follow. So that's what I wanted to teach today. I'm going to go to the chat and see what people have. Let's see. So glad to find useful online resources here, there. Let's see what we have. Let's see. For good rabbis on YouTube, I also like Michael Skoback on Tanat Talk channel and Tovia Singer. Tovia Singer's got, I don't know Tovia Singer personally, but has got a lot of videos on YouTube. I know that much. Let's see, we've got 92 Balthazar. Hi there, listening in from Ireland. I think this is a new face or new avatar anyway. Would love to find a rabbi to talk about learning more, but really struggling. I've reached out, but have been told that they don't offer conversion classes. So here's another thing I want to just raises a question for me is if you're first learning about Judaism, I wouldn't necessarily approach a rabbi and say, maybe I'm interested in conversion. Maybe you just want to know about Judaism, maybe without the necessary intention to convert. When I took my first class, I had zero intention of converting. I thought that was an impossibility for me because of my particular philosophical beliefs vis-a-vis religion. I studied Judaism for a year with no intention of converting until I asked the right questions, had the right information presented to me, and then I started talking about conversion. So maybe you just want to know more about what's in the Tanakh. Maybe you just want to know more about what's in the Talmud. And in that case, a rabbi might want to teach you. Some rabbis do have a philosophy that they want to focus their Torah teaching on Jewish people, because there's a lot of Jewish people who don't know a lot about the Torah. That's just a reality. I mean, sometimes people inherit a tradition but don't have the access of the teachers to learn it. And so there's some rabbis whose mission it is to teach only Jewish people to fill that gap, to focus on the people for whom this is already their tradition. And they may decide, I don't take on conversion candidates. But I also know there are some rabbis who do work with people who aren't Jewish and may never be Jewish, who want to know more about the Torah. So I'll say, to the extent possible, find somebody in your area to learn with you, whether you wind up converting or not, or go online for resources and try to connect with rabbis that way. You can absorb a lot passively just by watching videos, listening to podcasts, reading articles. But I would encourage you to reach out from time to these teachers that you're learning with online. Let's see. Woolen Bullet from Nova Scotia. I've recently returned to my Judaism and have recently joined a local shul. I've been feeling a lot of insecurity around my knowledge, and I find your podcast so confidence building. Oh, thank you so much. That's really nice, Woolen Bullet. It's weird to call people by their YouTube handles, but maybe that's your real name. I don't know. But this is why editing software is cool and why lives streaming is sometimes hilarious. So the idea that I want to focus on is something that Woolen Bullet shared is somebody returning to their Judaism. And I know a lot of people are born Jewish. They maybe go through Hebrew school. They go through their bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, and then they're out. Right? And I'm not saying this is the case here, but a lot of people kind of fall away from it. I mean, I was raised in a religious household. By, I'll say, middle school, high school, I was done. And it didn't really have a draw for me anymore. And that's true in different faiths. That's true in Judaism, certainly. And many people don't come back to it until later in life. Maybe they're getting married and they decide they want to have a religious presence at their wedding, or maybe they have kids, and that's sort of a existential wake-up call that you really feel like you're connected to something greater than yourself, and you want to introduce that to your children. Many people don't come back until they have a significant loss in their life. That could be a sort of a tragic personal event, God forbid. It could be the death of a family member. There's a kind of a saying among rabbis that we get them when their kids are born and when their parents die, and that's kind of glib and cynical sounding, but that's the truth of when people often return to synagogues. And again, not saying that's the case here in Nova Scotia, but people drift, but people step away from it for a certain part of their life, and then things happen, and then they come back. And for me, this is a fraught moment because, as Woolen Bullet is expressing, people feel insecurity for their level of knowledge having been away. And here is, and I'm bringing this up because here is a big myth that I want to bust for you. For me, the greatest tragedy of, I'll say, synagogue life is that I believe a synagogue or a Jewish community like that is the one place where every Jew should feel at home, where every Jew should feel native. Your life may be topsy-turvy. You may not feel at home in your town or in your job or something like that. But I think every Jew should be able to come to a synagogue and say, whew, I'm home. This is safe. This is a harbor. This is a place where I should feel native. And yet, because of the structure of Jewish community, because of the structure of Jewish worship, especially in Orthodox and conservative, but also many Reform and Reconstructing Judaism places, the service is in Hebrew, right? And the rituals are very well ordered and repetitive, and you walk in for the first time or for the first time in a while, and you're like, dude, everybody seems to know what's going on except for me. And that leads to this feeling where you enter this space that's supposed to feel like home for you, and you feel like a foreigner, right? You feel like you don't speak the language because you may literally not speak the language. And it's compounded by that feeling that everybody gets it except for you. That's a video that we're going to do, I think maybe tomorrow, or there's another time this week we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome, especially for Jewish converts, but not just for converts. Is this feeling of, I don't belong, I don't know what's going on, are people going to detect that about me? And that's a further piece of anxiety that I think separates people from rabbis, separates people from Jewish community. And here's where I want to bust that myth. If you walk into a synagogue and you see everybody seems to know what they're doing, I guarantee you no one in that room knows everything. The rabbi or the prayer leader might know the most, although that's not always true, but nobody there knows everything. And a lot of people know how to go through the service and do all the choreography of bowing and even know the words to say and when to say them. But that's because of practice. That's because of learning through osmosis. And a lot of people pray in a language that they don't necessarily have 100% they don't necessarily have a 100% comprehension of. And so I guarantee you that walking into a place, most people don't know everything that's going on. And so I say that not to bust on people who are synagogue regulars or rabbis or cantors or anything like that, but to help put you at ease that everybody in that room was once a beginner. Everybody in that room came in one time and felt out of place, unless they were like going to synagogue from age 3 and without a break since, or they're like the rabbi's kid or something like that. I've got a couple of those myself. The vast majority of people came into that room as a beginner at one point. And only by, let's say, kind of swallowing that fear and coming back, right, having that courage. I'm often taught that courage isn't about not having fear. It's about having that fear and taking action anyway. And so if you feel insecure about your level of knowledge, there's one way through that. And that is to return. That is to ask questions. That is all the more so you should make a connection with a rabbi to help guide you into greater understanding. And it takes time. And it can be frustrating. And it can take a lot of patience. But I would like to, as much as I can, allay people's fears and insecurities. Nobody in that room knows everything. Most people in that room that you may be afraid or insecure of entering was exactly where you are now at one point. And those are the people that you can learn from. I've learned at least as much from the Jews in the pews, as they say, as I have from rabbis. People who said, like, look, here's the page number that we're on. Why don't you sit with me? So often, some places don't feel that friendly, and that could be like a cultural thing. I lived in Minnesota, and the joke in Minnesota was that it's the kind of place that welcomes you with folded arms, if you get my drift. But if a synagogue's not feeling welcome to you, go to a different one, or just keep showing up. And when you just keep showing up, and the people know that you're serious, and they know that you intend to stay and not go anywhere, they will warm up to you most likely, and then they're going to hand you a Siddur, a prayer book, turn to the right page, right? And next thing you know, you're a made guy, you're a made gal, you're considered one of the fold, right? And that's, in my experience, the best way to cut through that very natural very healthy, very surmountable insecurity that most people have at one point or another. I hope that's helpful for you. That's how I got through it. So, Grycicle shares, there's an old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. I like that. I don't know if that's a Jewish saying, but maybe it should be. Let's see. Willem Bill shares, I definitely drifted in my teenage and young adult years. I definitely drifted in my teenage and young adult years. My journey of return happened by chance. I went to a coffee house lecture my Shoals rabbi gave on women in the Talmud. So that's another place. Sometimes you should show up at a coffee house and there's a rabbi there teaching Torah or giving a historical lecture or something like that. Budrod, new face in the crowd, Budrod 2 says, sadly, I fear that sets kids on a path of only showing up a few times a year, no connection to the shul or faith. And I'm not going to express a judgment there, but I am going to express that as a reality, and not just among Jews. Sometimes I joke around with my interfaith colleagues, and I say, you know how you have some people who just come to your church on Christmas and Easter, 2 days a year, and they say, yeah, we call them, 2-day-a-year Christians. And I'm like, well, we have that too, but our 2 days are 10 days apart. Right? It's not one in the winter and one in the spring. It's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. It's like a week and a half. So I really appreciate everybody's learning with me. I'm looking for some questions here to make sure I answer everything that's been asked. If you ask me a question and I haven't answered it yet, do me a favor and type it down there, because it's maybe I've lost it in the scroll. So I got to get it. There's a scroll on the internet too. All right, this has been a really great experience for me, seeing a lot of new faces today, seeing some old friendly faces. Well, not old, but friends of long standing. I'll put it that way. I don't know how old you are really through the internet. They say on the internet, no one knows if you're a dog. But then I read another comment that said on the internet, everyone knows that you're a dog because you can find out things about people. I'm not encouraging that necessarily. But it's been my great joy to learn live with everybody today, to talk about what is a rabbi, why you need one, how to find one, both where you are in physical space as well as online. I hope I've given people some helpful tips on how to connect with a rabbi who doesn't answer you right away, why that might be the case, how to deal with the fact that a rabbi might push you away. Right? There is a, I'll say, tradition. Bubba Misa is another word for it. That rabbis are supposed to push you away 3 times before they take you on as a student, and this could be for conversion. This could apply to other scenarios as well. Part of the process of becoming someone's teacher is determining their sincerity. Right? And so most of the time it's just because rabbis are busy. But it could be that a rabbi is legit turning you away, hoping that you'll come back because they want to make sure that you are sincere about pursuing your studies before they invest the time in you. And then once they're sure, once they know you're sincere, they will invest the time in you. The right rabbi for you will absolutely do that. So I hope that's been helpful for you. It's really been, once again, my delight learning with you live. And I'll ask that if you're watching this video on YouTube right now or catching the replay later, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Not for my ego, but because, and I do have a pretty enormous ego, but not for my ego, because it helps other people find this video that might be right for them. And also, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. I've got 4 more live sessions coming up this week, and I'd love it if you join me. Like I said, I've got some old friends here, a lot of new friends as well. And so thank you for doing this learning with me. I'm going to pause for a second here, give some podcasty sounding announcements, and then we'll sign off for the day. So, Hero, thank you so much for listening to this podcast, this episode 30 of the Jew Curious School, this episode number 30 of the Jew Curious Show. And I'm a little bit giddy about this episode 30 because I recently heard a statistic that 90% of podcasts shut down before they've reached their 30th episode. And so this may be podcast inside baseball, but this is a personal win for me, not because I did anything great, but because people have showed up to listen and people have reached out to me, and I've heard from people who have been helped by this show or encouraged by this show. And I wouldn't have made it to episode 30, certainly, if I didn't know that there were some really great people out there listening, reaching out to me, and finding value in what it is that we are learning together. There's a saying from my teachers that he who teaches learns twice. That's totally been true for me. I've learned so much in teaching in this way. And so thank you, Hero. I'm really grateful to you for that. Speaking of reaching out, the other great thing about this podcast is the community of listeners that I've seen form around it. We put together something based on a listener request. We put together something called the Jew Curious Community Center. That is a private, carefully tended, strictly troll-free zone, a private Facebook group that you can join by going to jewcurious.show/JCC. One more time, that's jewcurious.show/JCC, as in Jewish Community Center, as in Jew Curious Community Center, but much shorter and less typing. So check that out. I'd love to see you in the community. If you'd like to learn more about this episode and what additional resources you might find on this topic, be sure to check out the show notes. Be sure to check out the show notes at jewcurious.show/episode 30. That's the word episode, the number 30. Finally, one last request. If you have enjoyed this episode or prior episodes, I would really be personally grateful if you would leave us a review on iTunes. iTunes is the biggest search engine out there of podcasts, and they help people find podcasts that are right for them based on listener reviews. So go check that out on iTunes. Just type in the word Jew Curious, probably exactly like it sounds, and once you find it, go to the place that says rate this podcast or leave a review, give it the appropriate number of stars, and if you will, a few words of your honest assessment of this podcast, how it's helped you, how it might help somebody else, and that it will help people who need this show to find it. And I would be personally much obliged. And until next time, heroes, peace. All right, everybody. That is the conclusion of the live studio recording. I just want to reiterate my thanks. Just take a second to see if there are any more questions. If you Greissicle shares, if you're new to a shul, you can also call ahead to say you would like to attend. Saturday mornings would be a good time to start. That's usually when things are most chill. Also the best lunch. But that's one thing. And I see Caleb is in the house from Tejas. Thank you for being here, Caleb. And one thing that I probably failed to mention, but this is a little bonus for being here live. Depending on what part of the world you are in, before you show up at services, you may need to call. If you go to a shul and there is an armed guard outside and they will not let you in under any circumstance, please don't take that personally. Many synagogues in many countries in the world are on an increased security footing or have been for some time. And in order to attend services at a new place, like they know all the regulars, but if you're coming in off the street on a Saturday morning, especially if you're not from that city or country, they may be hesitant to let you in. That's not personal, nothing about you. That's just a security policy that they have. So if you're at a new place, if you're in South America or Mexico City, I've heard about this in England. Sometimes is the case in Israel, not so much. Other places in Europe, for example. If you want to attend a synagogue, I would recommend calling ahead and letting them know, I'm in town, I want to attend a synagogue service, I don't bite, I'm not dangerous. They may ask you to send them ID. They may ask you to get on a list or something like that. Again, that's not about you. That is a security measure that they have taken. And so the best thing is to just comply with that. Call ahead, let them know you're coming. And even in the United States, there are some places that are on higher security. But just security measures aside, it's nice to let them know you're coming, because then the rabbi may go out of her or his way to meet with you. They like to know when new people are there, and they say, oh, yeah, Bob, you called this week. I'm really glad to meet you. Let me introduce you to everybody. Sit with me at lunch, and we'll talk more about whatever questions you have. So it's a nice thing to do if visiting a place for the first time, to call ahead. It may be necessary to get admittance, or it may just be a nice thing, a nice introduction to the rabbi or the community before you get there, and it just smooths everything over once you're there. So that is a great recommendation, Greissicle. Thank you so much. All right, everybody, I'm going to conclude this live session. Really appreciated learning this material with you today. Appreciated your great questions and comments and feedback that are now shared in the future with the True Curious podcast audience. And we've got another live thing coming up tomorrow. I think tomorrow we're talking about that imposter syndrome. Many people have anxiety about whether they'll be fully accepted or whether they'll feel fully accepted. Those are two different things, but both very natural and very important. We'll be talking later this week about how to talk to your family. Many people are on this path and their family or friends are not on this path, and that becomes kind of a delicate negotiation. We're going to talk about LGBTQ issues when it comes to being Jewish. A lot of people have asked me questions about this lately. I didn't want to just answer those questions one off. I wanted to make a video about it with a caveat that I'll say I identify as a member of that community, but I like to think of myself as an ally of that community, and I am versed in what various communities teach about issues surrounding LGBTQ and things like that. And so we'll talk about it as best I can. Hopefully I'm going to have somebody on the podcast who has more personal experience that they can share. But because I've been getting the questions, I didn't want to dodge it. I want to give the best teaching that I'm capable of. I think that's happening on Thursday. And then on Friday, we'll do the Parshat HaShavua again. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Really appreciate learning with you. And until next time, everybody, peace.